The Alpha King cast out his pregnant Luna. Years later, her return changed the fate of every pack. Seraphine Ashcroft stood in the center of the great hall, with her hands folded in front of her, and she did not cry. Around her, 200 wolves waited in silence. The fires along the walls threw long shadows across the stone floor. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat Draven, the Alpha King, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed somewhere above her head, as if looking at her directly might cost him something he could not afford to lose. "The evidence is clear," said Lyra, standing at his right hand, her voice smooth as poured water. Her scent was found at the border meeting with the Colvane emissary. Twice. "I have never met with anyone from Colvane," Seraphine said. Her voice did not shake. "The mark doesn't lie," Lyra said. Seraphine looked at Draven. She waited for him to ask her one question. Just one. "Look at me and ask if it's true." He didn't ask. "Seraphine of the Ashcroft line," Draven said, and his voice cracked once before he steadied it. "You are no longer Luna of this pack. You are banished from these lands, effective at sunrise." She did not beg. She had promised herself long ago that she would never beg a man who had already decided not to believe her. So she only nodded, once, and turned, and walked out through the great doors while every wolf in the hall watched her go. What none of them knew, what she herself had only confirmed 2 days earlier, was that she was carrying his child. She told no one, not the guards who marched her to the border, not the healer who had confirmed it in secret, not even Draven, who deserved perhaps to know, but who had also just proven he did not deserve anything from her at all. She walked until the gates of the kingdom were a memory, until her legs gave out somewhere in the Ferran wilderness, an unclaimed stretch of land where no pack held authority, and no laws applied except the ones wolves made for themselves out of necessity. An old, half-blind rogue named Corvin found her collapsed near a creek. He was dying of something slow, something that had already taken most of his territory's wolves to other packs, leaving him alone in a crumbling lodge with more rooms than he had reasons to fill. He didn't ask her name. He only asked if she could cook, and when she said yes, he let her stay. She gave birth in that lodge 7 months later, with Corvin's shaking hands and a stack of boiled towels the only assistance she had. She named her son Cade, after no one, because she wanted him to belong to nothing that had already failed her. Corvin died the following winter. He left her the lodge, the land, and nothing else. No wolves, no income, no protection. Seraphine buried him herself, because there was no one else to do it. And then she looked at her infant son and understood that survival was no longer a feeling. It was a job. She started small. She traded herbs with travelers who passed through, because she knew which plants healed and which ones killed, and she never confused the two. She offered shelter to wolves running from cruel alphas in the region, wolves nobody wanted, wolves with old wounds and worse tempers, and she gave them work instead of judgment. Slowly, without meaning to build anything at all, she built something. By the time Cade was 5, there were a dozen wolves calling the lodge home. By the time he was 10, there were 50, and the old rogue lands had a name again, Ferran, spoken not with pity, but with a kind of careful respect. By the time he was 18, Ferran had proper borders, trade agreements with 3 neighboring territories, and a reputation that traveled faster than any of them expected. The pack where the Alpha never lied to her own wolves, and never let anyone go hungry who was willing to work. Seraphine ruled it all. She had never asked to be an Alpha. She had simply refused to be a victim, and one thing turned into the other without her noticing the exact moment it happened. Cade grew up strong and quiet, with a habit of watching people longer than they were comfortable with before he spoke. He asked about his father exactly twice in his life. The first time, at 7, she told him his father was a man who had made a mistake he didn't know he was making. The second time, at 15, she told him the truth. All of it. The accusation, the banishment, the silence when she needed one question and got none. Cade did not ask a third time. He simply carried it, the way he carried most things, without comment. The Unity Summit came once every 5 years. Every pack Alpha in the region was required to attend. By an old agreement, none of them fully remembered the origin of, but all of them still honored, because breaking it meant war, and no one wanted war badly enough to test it. Seraphine had never gone. Ferran had never been recognized as a proper pack before. This year, it was. The invitation arrived by Hawk, sealed in wax bearing the mark of the Unity Council. Seraphine read it twice at her kitchen table, while Cade leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't have to go," he said. "I do," she said. "If we don't show up, they'll assume we're weak, or hiding, or both. Then I'm coming with you." She looked at him for a long moment. He was 23 now, broad through the shoulders, with her steadiness in his spine, and someone else's exact eyes. A fact she had never told him outright, though she suspected he'd guessed it from the way people sometimes stared at him a beat too long. "All right," she said. "But you don't speak unless I ask you to." He didn't argue. That too was very much like him. The summit was held in neutral territory, a wide stone amphitheater built into a hillside, ringed by banners from every pack in the region. Seraphine walked in with Cade a step behind her right shoulder, and the hall went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when it recognizes someone it had assumed was gone for good. Draven was seated at the head of the gathering, older now, heavier in the face, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Beside him, a chair sat pointedly empty where Lyra should have been, though Seraphine didn't yet know why. His eyes found her the moment she entered. Then they moved to Cade, and something in his posture changed, a stillness that wasn't calm at all, but the opposite of it, held very carefully in place. "Seraphine," he said, and his voice carried across the entire hall. "You're recognized as Alpha of Ferran." "I am," she said. "And this is—" He stopped. He looked at Cade the way a man looks at a door he suspects leads somewhere he can't come back from once he opens it. "My son," Seraphine said, before he could finish the question wrong. "Cade." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Draven didn't ask the question everyone else was clearly thinking. He didn't need to. Cade's face did the asking for him, the shape of his jaw, the exact color of his eyes, features that belonged to the Ashcroft line, as surely as the crest stitched into Draven's collar. "How old is he?" Draven finally asked, quietly, though the hall was quiet enough that everyone heard it anyway. 23, Seraphine said. "Born 7 months after I left your lands." She watched the math land on his face, watched him do the arithmetic he should have done years ago, standing in his own great hall, if he had asked one single question, instead of accepting Lyra's word over hers. He didn't say anything for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all its formal weight. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Seraphine said. "Not cruel, just true." The summit continued around them, territory disputes, trade agreements, matters that belonged to 200 wolves who had not spent the last several minutes reliving the worst day of their lives. But for Draven, none of it registered. He sat through the proceedings staring at a young man who was, in every visible way, his son, and who looked back at him with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. After the summit closed for the evening, a guard approached Draven privately, an old guard, gray around the muzzle now, who had stood post the night Seraphine was banished. He handed Draven a small wooden box. "I kept this," the guard said. "I didn't believe the accusation. Not from the start. I followed Lyra's movements for months after, on my own time. It's all there. The real border logs, the real scent records. Proof she planted the evidence herself." Draven opened the box slowly, in the privacy of his own tent, and read through years of quietly gathered truth that could have ended his marriage's ruin before it ever began, if only someone had brought it to him sooner, or if only he had looked for it himself, instead of trusting the person standing closest to him. Lyra was gone from the pack within the week, stripped of her title, exiled to the same borderlands she had once helped force Seraphine into. No one felt sorry for her. Seraphine did not attend the proceedings. She said, when asked, that she had already spent enough years thinking about that woman, and she did not intend to spend any more. Draven came to Ferran alone 3 weeks after the summit ended. No guards, no title, no crown. He walked the same border road Seraphine had once walked in the opposite direction, and when he reached the lodge, it was Cade who opened the door. The two men stood there for a long moment, close enough in height and build that anyone passing by would have known instantly what they were to each other, even without the shared eyes. "I'm not here to ask your mother to come back," Draven said. "I don't think that's mine to ask anymore." "Then why are you here?" Cade said. "To ask if you'd let me know you. If you want that, I understand. If you don't." Cade studied him the way he studied everyone, a beat too long, weighing something Draven couldn't see. Behind him, in the hallway, Seraphine had stopped, her hand resting on the doorframe, listening without meaning to. "I don't forgive you," Cade said finally. "I'm not saying I will. I'm not asking you to. But you can come in," Cade said. "We'll see what happens from there." He stepped aside. Draven crossed the threshold of the home Seraphine had built entirely without him, a home with its own rules, its own strength, its own name that no longer needed his kingdom's permission to exist. Seraphine watched from the hallway as the two of them sat down at the kitchen table where she had once read the summit invitation aloud, and for the first time in more years than she could easily count, she let herself feel something that wasn't resolve, or duty, or survival. She didn't know yet what would come of it, whether Draven would earn back anything at all, whether Cade would ever call him anything warmer than him, whether her own heart, long since sealed shut for its own protection, would ever crack open again for the man who had once let her walk out a gate without asking a single question. But Ferran remained hers, built by her own hands, standing on its own ground, needing nothing from the kingdom that had cast her out to prove it was real. And that, more than any reunion, more than any apology, was the truth she had spent 23 years earning the right to stand inside of.